And surely Path of Exile 1 only gets bigger and better from here as well, because for the past few years they've been working.
I have to pause. I've watched Methal's video on this. Do you guys agree that now that PoE 2 is nearing completion, that when PoE 2 is finished, they'll have a much bigger team for PoE 1? And they'll have way more resources, and PoE 1 will no longer be on the back burner, and it will be a much bigger, greater, bigger thing. That is so much copium, but I mean, I like the smell of it though. Chris said so. Man, someone's gotta work on PoE 3. Okay, look, all I'm saying is if Mathel's take here is correct, then I'm happy. I don't give a... I'm happy. Chris, explain. Can you tell me where he said it? Exactly? Didn't you get to feel Mathel's muscles? How did it feel? Oh, it was like... It was weird. It's too much muscle. I got the shirt, by the way. Hang on. I got this shirt. Should I put it on? Oh, shit. This is the only shirt I bought from Exilecon. There we go.
This is a very special interview with Chris and Mark. They felt really, really bad about how bad that mobile demo went, and they wanted to make it up to me and give me an opportunity to get something worthwhile for traveling down to Exilecon 4. At midnight, Bex sent me a message. Hey, how do you feel about coming to the office tomorrow? And
He said Bex. He said Bex. What happened with Bex? So Bex is leaving GGG. Rumor has it she left the building saying D4 good, PoE bad. She's going to work with Blizzard, the superior game. Meme obviously.
hello, how's it going, everyone? Sanctum here with a post-Exilecon interview with Chris and Mark. And yeah, we're just gonna talk about what happened.
He might not have washed this shirt because he was wearing this the night before.
Speaking of Ripple in the water, one of the most controversial things is Path of Exile 1 and 2 being totally separate games right now. In terms of philosophical approach and how you guys are going to be dealing with
an anonymous.
Notice how he said controversial. Do you think the devs thought it would be controversial? I'm really curious if they thought it would be controversial.
Leagues and how you think about the games. Should we be thinking of them as just, I'm a Path of Exile 1 player, I'm a Path of Exile 2 player, I love both, or what kind of player am I, and what should I be thinking, going into having multiple games now?
We definitely want people to play both if possible. If some people prefer one of the games, want to skip one of the leagues, depending on what it is, that's always fine. Path of Exile's a game you can pick up and come back to whenever you want to. I mean, obviously when you watch the PoE 2 demo and we're taking care to explain the mechanics and combat stuff in a careful way, and it feels a bit slow-paced, while the reality of people playing proper endgame characters is of course the speed and combinatorial complexity that we've come to love from Path of Exile, if there are aspects of either game that you prefer, it's a good opportunity to keep playing that one because we're supporting both of them as much as we can in the future.
From my perspective, I'm a player too. I played the game before I got hired here. I still play the game every single league, and I am looking forward to playing every single league for both of them. And I mean, hopefully that answers enough of what I'm looking forward to do and what we're trying to achieve. So.
Yeah, I can speak to
that unironically
that
helps.
demo, that Huntress. Now, speaking of the split, in terms of one of the other fears is resource allocation between Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2. Is that something that you guys want to comment on right now?
I think that Path of Exile 1 will see even more resources allocated to it as Path of Exile 2 nears completion, and there's a few reasons for that. The first one is, when we were working for the last few years, the quiet period where we weren't talking about Path of Exile 2, we had probably over-allocated art resources to Path of Exile 1 in particular. Most of our team is artists. The vast majority of people working for us are artists, as is the nature of AAA game development. And we were producing leagues where every single piece of content was, to some extent, unnecessarily new, because Path of Exile has such a vast library of assets that we can fall back on. And this was slowing down development of Path of Exile 2 quite a lot. It was taking a lot longer than we expected. And so we realized that we needed to make sure most of the artists were working on Path of Exile 2, and we had the Path of Exile 1 team, with a small team of artists primarily consisting of designers and programmers, able to reuse all the stuff we've made and and make sure we're coming up with new mechanics that used our existing art in interesting ways. And you'll notice when you look at leagues over the last couple of years, they've been a bit less art intensive than ones like, say, Heist or Betrayal that involved dozens of characters and crazy new tile sets and so on. And so the environment art team and the monster creation team and so on have been hard at work on Path of Exile 2, but that pipeline is going to eventually run out of work to do as the game gets completed. Like, for example, with concept art, where they work out, especially environmental concept art, where they're sketching new areas. I mean, we know what the new areas are for the 6 acts of Path of Exile 2. At some point, they're going to run out of new areas to work on, in which case they're available for either future Path of Exile 2 expansions or Path of Exile 1 expansions. And so, as the teams of Path of Exile 2 gradually get taken off the major production mode they're in at the moment, it's going to free them up to be working on both games. And so we'll probably be seeing quite meaningful Path of Exile 1 expansions that continue to grow, especially once the Path of Exile 1 team, it's not that they're going to be competitive with the Path of Exile 2 team, but they certainly want to pull in good player numbers. And so there's going to be quite a drive to try to, gently one-up the other game in terms of the amount of awesomeness that we can actually deliver. So we're expecting to see some good stuff. And I'm sure Mark has a unique perspective from the PoE 2 point of view as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of developers working on both. Myself, sure, I'm not inputting the data for the monsters or anything, but I am certainly deciding what they are, what they do, and for both contexts. And from the art perspective, looking at from just, say, monsters, and I mentioned this at the convention as well at one point, but something like Sanctum, the bosses in Sanctum were taken from PoE 2 resources. Those are, Lycia was a monster that was made for PoE 2, a boss that hadn't found a home in PoE 2 either yet or as of this current, or as of when it was ported. And so we were like, well, let's use it in PoE 1. And so even then, even though you've got all these artists working on PoE 2, a lot of them are kind of indirectly working on PoE 1 because we're using a lot of those assets in PoE 1 as well. And we've been doing this for a very, very long time.
I'm so glad Sanctum's coming back, by the way. How many of you Sanctum enjoyers? A lot of people didn't like Sanctum because it felt repetitive, but I reckon the unique challenge relics provided enough change in gameplay that it was enjoyable. I really like Sanctum. I thought it was the best out of map league mechanic. It won't be the same without Sanctified Relics. I don't think Sanctified Relics were the reason I ran Sanctum. I think it was the Divine Orbs. please let them still drop shit tons of currency. Come on, dude. That would be sick. If they make Sanctum rewards shit, I'll be sad. I'll be sad, chat.
It's also worth noting, with content reuse, it may seem like a bit of a dirty thing to intentionally take something and dress it up as something else in the game. It seems lazy or cheap to do so, but it's actually kind of the fabric of how we approach the company. Back when I started it with Jonathan and Eric a long time ago, we realized that with the limited amount of funds we had available, we're trying to make a game for 20 times less budget than other studios would. We had to go deep on the content reuse. We had to make sure every asset could be used in as many different ways as possible, like color reskins and resize.
This right here, by the way, is why I don't like what D4 did with their campaign, because I don't think it was replayable. We fight some cool bosses. Oh, one sec, chat. Hold the phone. I'll let the interview play. Hold the phone.
Shapes and chop stuff around and make sure that we could reuse it as much as we could.
Speaking of Sanctum, regarding to that coming back, the number one question on everyone's mind, can you comment on the uniques yet, or?
I believe our current intention is to keep them as they were. We have no intention to change them.
By the way, chat, guess what? Guess what it was, by the way, chat? You know how I was saying my package was delivered to my neighbor? Well, my absolute giga chat of a neighbor noticed I had come back, and they were like, hey, so I've got a package for you. My absolute giga chat of a neighbor. Holy chat.
Yeah, it's certainly our goal to have a wide variety of powerful uniques, because Sanctum itself
Does that mean we're getting Eternal
a
Damnation?
valuable thing to find and a valuable thing to run and hard to get through 4 floors of it, and hard to kill Lycia in both forms, and therefore getting an appropriately powerful reward is good. And if we were to determine that one of these was too powerful, well, we can just make it harder to get, make Sanctums harder to get, whatever we need to do. But I'd rather that a powerful thing existed in the game as very rare rather than being removed entirely, which is why Headhunter still exists.
one of the coolest things that I saw this weekend is that you guys are bringing in some tweaks to Sanctum for defenses actually applying to the resolve loss. And I thought that was a beautiful, elegant solution.
Well, we're okay with people working out what builds work best in Sanctum because it's itemized and you can trade 4 Sanctums. If you can specialize and just get a pile of Sanctums and run them profitably, that is a way to play Path of Exile. Now, of course, if the build is deemed to be too powerful, we will probably eventually adjust it. We do want to make sure it's balanced and fair, but absolutely there will be a good way to build characters and a bad way to build characters, which is the same for any of the content in the game. And it's worth noting as well that we've when we've been rebalancing Sanctum, we've taken an opportunity to change monster diversity, so you'll be facing a wider variety of threats within the areas, so it's a bit less predictable. And this does mean you do have to be a bit of a jack of all trades with regard to the types of monster mods and so on you're encountering.
Okay.
I certainly found Sanctum to be, at its core, amazing. But the monster diversity was probably my personal problem I had when playing it on the live realm.
That's Noogie's main complaint too.
We have so many monsters in the game, there's no reason we need to be, and we're talking about reuse of art assets and all of that, there's no reason we can't be making more of them, so.
And players love Dutch Nemesis, so.
It's been kind of a roller coaster over the past couple of years, but I would, for myself personally, defense actually feels in a really cool place. Like, we have so many different options between Fourth Vow, Blood Notch, Doppelgangers. There's so many cool options to become very tanky across basically every ascendancy in the game. Are you guys really happy with where defense is right now? And what's the interplay between PoE 1 and 2 and how you guys are thinking about defense right now?
I would say in PoE 1 I'm pretty happy with it. Again, there's always the small things, and there's the whole everyone running Grace Determination kind of situations and all of that, and you could argue one way or the other whether or not these are good things or bad things.
Okay, I gotta give my take here. I had this talk with Nigga the other day. My opinion is flasks being the base for defense was bad for the game because they were too conditional. Like, when they were up, you were fine. When they were down, you were not fine. And they're very easily down a lot of the time because of the nature of flask system. So I did not like that. I did not like that anytime you were fighting a boss and your flasks were down, you had to leave. I did not like that. And I prefer auras being the baseline defense for the game. And the fact that they're scalable means you can start with X amount of defense that you just get. Every class just gets Determination or Grace or whatever. And then you scale it up however much you want. You can get gear on, you can get gear, aura effect, all that kind of shit. You can get the Defiance Banner, etc. I prefer it. Did anyone complain that you had to use a Granite Flask? Not really. I would rather use Determination than a Granite Flask. Obviously, I know we use both, but the point is you're shifting a lot of the power of a Granite Flask from the old version to a Determination, which is, I like it. It's much better. Like, the difference between a Mathil build before the aura change and after the aura change is massive. Like, before, Mathil builds were memed on. Now they're not because they have that baseline defense. So I think it's a good thing. I would argue in favor. The one thing I would say is spell suppression needs a rework or something. It needs adjustments because of what it does to your itemization. Like, if you want to use Vixens, it's like a pain in the ass because of spell suppression. And the spell suppression mastery makes this worse too. I don't like the spell suppression mastery. You know, the one that you have to have evasion on every piece of gear or whatever? Personally, I hope that there's a spell suppression tattoo because that will help the gear a lot. So I actually hope we get a spell suppression. So I'm hoping there's a dex one that has like 20 spell suppression, because that alone, that's like instant. Imagine you can now use an item that you couldn't use before because of spell suppression. Like Brass Dome's a good example of this, right? Brass Dome is a really cool item, but it cucks your spell suppression. Like it could be the difference between getting cap suppression and not cap suppression. Just having that tattoo.
So we added the concept of server-side sub-objects. So for example, I can, if just simulating Katava a little bit, when he buries his hand on the ground, we can then turn on this sub-object, and now you can damage it. And then when he brings his arm back up, it's no longer there, can't be damaged. This is not something we had before, but yes, it means that objects don't need to have central hitboxes, because we can just turn that off, and instead both their legs can, their arm, whatever limbs. There's some monsters have limbs.
Man, you know when he went back and saw this happen, he was just fucking devastated. Oh no. Is PoE gonna lead to the same game as PoE 1? No, so as far as I am aware, Path of Exile 2 does not currently have an endgame. I assume they would have talked about it at some point, but as far as I'm aware, I mean, obviously it's gonna be maps, right? Obviously, but they haven't shown it yet that I'm aware of. I'm guessing it's the plan. Yeah, I think it's more of a plan, right? Like the plan is maps, which makes sense, obviously. But my point being there is this: just pretend PoE 2 is Diablo 5 or something, or it's just a different game. So we can make a lot of assumptions, but it's not like related to PoE 1 in that way. Like it doesn't merge to the same endgame anymore. That's just gone.
How do you guys currently feel about offense in Path of Exile 1? Also regarding like borrowed power between the leagues, looking at all that, like we had sanctified relics and then we have the crucible trees. And yeah, when we have those things, they feel really, really good. But kind of knowing, at least for me, the confidence that I've been feeling pretty good league after league for a while now, it feels pretty good. Do we anticipate this as kind of a pattern?
In the past, our philosophy was try to make stuff core as much as possible, pile the game full of content because a bigger game is better, and it's because people liked systems, we leave them in generally, right? You know, you get to keep talismans, you get to just have those forever, and any stuff we release in you know, that's the first of the expansions that started to have its own unique reward arc, which is why I use it as the first example. I understand the power level of talismans is very low by current levels, but basically every one of the things that we had would, you know, like catalysts and, you know, anointments and that kind of stuff would just all get piled into the game, and you get more and more of these.
Fucking talisman.
And that's good, but they all add a small amount of incremental power gain compared to the previous league. They let you juice your mods up slightly more, they let you do a bit more damage, they let you progress a bit more quickly. And it got to the point with, you know, the 315 situation where we, you know, looked at the power creep and said we need to do something about hitting off some of this. And that was received poorly because, you know, people don't like to lose something they have. Fair enough, and we've heard that. And so we've been making a bit more of an intentional decision recently to be conscious of what power creep we cumulatively merge into the base game. And so as with Sanctified Relics and Crucible Trees, you can have them for the league, and we may find a way to bring them back later, but we don't want to just stack them all up on top of each other. Otherwise, the issue with Path of Exile both becoming somewhat complicated and unapproachable and literally melting server hardware. No, I shouldn't say literally, that's not true. I have seen fire.
Okay.
Anyway, that starts to become a problem, and that's why we're being careful to swap things out. Having said that, you know, there's still continued power gain in Path of Exile one happening league by league, and we do try to make things core. We're just careful. There's certain things like recombinators where if we just frivolously made them core, then it would be of a similar impact to when we brought Harvest core without due consideration for the consequences.
I certainly am a huge fan of people becoming exceptionally powerful. We end up adding, you know, higher tier pinnacle bosses, and we just creep the content difficulty. You need to effectively have a PhD in order to, or I guess this is where build guides and ninja comes in, or you
guys give me a job by this complexity. Yeah, sure.
But figuring out that stuff, like of your own volition, is just so difficult now, and that's cool because the complexity is good. Like, never mistake anything like this of me. I want less complexity. I love it. I absolutely love it. And so there's this difficulty where you can't go backwards at all, even in that regard. Yet on the same scale, we're literally at like, you know, int max levels of life going on and levels of degen, and like you're hitting these just walls of like, how do we even make this work anymore? You start getting into these weird situations where like sometimes the intention isn't to just make people weaker. It's not. In fact, it's rarely to make things weaker. It's to just create that little bit more space so that we can allow either more people, but not the top people, to become stronger, or we can add higher difficulty content.
Yeah. I like both of these answers. Why they should just do both of those more. Like that. This is what Path of Math was molding over before he got banned, right? Buffing the bottom shit, right? That's basically a Path of Math take, like unironically, right? They should do that though. They should actually do that. They don't do it enough. That would be my complaint, is they don't do it enough. They don't buff the bottom stuff enough, right? My understanding, the reason they don't buff the bottom stuff enough is they don't want you to be forced to play something that you don't want to play. They don't, like, for example, imagine what it would take to make Heavy Strike stronger than Bone Shatter, and let's say they accomplish this, would you have more fun playing Bone Shatter or Heavy Strike? Trauma support. Yeah, true. They actually are kind of doing that with the trauma support. You're not wrong. This is yeah, I have seen this. This is toxic. This is actually toxic though. This is actually toxic, chat. This is actually toxic. I am going to go climbing. I'm gonna go do some real life stuff, and then we'll do a bigger deck stream tomorrow where I'll probably do some practice for the new league. Because I actually have not played PoE.
Just arrived and you go. Bye.
Like, has it been 2 months? No. Holy shit. Yeah, I don't think I've played PoE in like 2 months. That's the longest break I've ever had. Holy shit. So yeah, anyway, chat, we'll do that tomorrow. But cheers for hanging out. It's good to be back. But anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow. We're back. We're doing the daily streams again. So GG's. No more breaks. I'll see you guys tomorrow.